From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Rauschenbusch in New York City.
I become frustrated about what I can do as an elected leader in a city that has now witnessed the worst anti-Semitic attack in American history.
It's not just about anti-Semitism. It was an attack on America. Its foundation is hate.
White supremacy, white nationalism, and racism are national security threats.
Not in Our Town is a filmmaking project that's been going strong for 25 years, bringing stories of hope, resilience, and resistance to communities across the country. On this week's show, I'll talk with Patrice O'Neill, who leads the project at the Working Group, and we'll be joined by anti-hate activist Pardeep Singh Kaleka, who has a deep personal connection to the story told in the Not in Our Town documentary, Waking in Oak Creek. I'll also talk with social impact media strategist Mario Carter French about the enduring power of film for storytelling and connecting people, and for learning about religious diversity. We are growing the State of Belief, building on our 17-year history by partnering with Religion News Service. And as part of the RNS family of podcasts, there's a next generation, The State of Belief podcast I want to make sure you're subscribed to. Please visit stateofbelief.com/new podcast. It would really help to have you subscribe and to tell people you're close to about the conversations you are hearing. The State of Belief is made possible in great part by the generous support of our listeners. If you've made a donation, thank you for helping get these conversations heard by more people who need them. If you haven't pitched in yet, information on how you can help keep this show on the air is available at stateofbelief.com. And you can find out more about the work of Interfaith Alliance and join us at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my first guest. Patrice O'Neill is a filmmaker, CEO of the non-profit strategic media company, The Working Group, and founder and co-director of Not in Our Town, a movement of people across the country working to build safe, inclusive communities for all. And that's been going strong for 25 years. Pardeep Singh Kaleka is the son of Satwant Singh Kaleka, the leader of the Oak Creek Gurdwara, who was murdered, along with 5 others, at the Sikh temple in 2012. Pardeep is the author of Gifts of Our Wounds and a tireless anti-hate and interfaith leader. The tragedy of Oak Creek and its aftermath are examined in the 2013 Not in Our Town documentary film, Waking in Oak Creek. Both of these leaders have been on the State of Belief before, and it is great to have you here together today. Welcome to the State of Belief.
Thank you so much, Reverend Paul. It's great to be on with you all.
So, Patrice, what is Not in Our Town?
So people say, what is that name? What does that mean? Where did it come from? And Not in Our Town is the name of a film that we did. It aired on PBS in 1995. It was a story of people in Billings, Montana, standing up to hate crimes when white supremacists were organizing in their town. That story has driven our work for many years. Back in the 90s, white supremacists were laying claim to the northwest of the United States as their homeland. And so there were a whole series of attacks by white supremacists occurring in Billings, Montana. And the police chief at the time said, this isn't just a law enforcement problem. This is a community problem. What can we do together? So a Black church had skinheads show up at the service and intimidate this very small congregation. So members of other denominations were there to support them, and the skinheads went away. Then a Native American woman's house was plastered with racist graffiti, and 30 members of the painters union decided to go and paint it over. 100 neighbors were there to watch. So people in the town started learning what they could do themselves to stand up. The culminating event took place when a 6-year-old Jewish boy placed a menorah in his window for Hanukkah. A brick was thrown through the window and it landed on his bed, and people knew that things were becoming more dangerous. What can we do? And they said, they can't possibly attack every Jewish home if we're all Jewish. So let's all put menorahs in their windows. And that year, 10,000 people put menorahs in their windows for Hanukkah. And the
Wow.
white supremacist organizing stopped.
What is so amazing about Not in Our Town films, I have to say, is that you pinpoint something horrific, like really the worst that could possibly happen, and you tell that story, but you don't stop there. You tell what happened after. And I just think that that is often the media has packed up, they've moved on. And you don't hear what the community went through and all of the incredible work and effort and heartbreak and but also solidarity that can happen in this moment. And Pardeep, you know this firsthand in what happened in Oak Creek. And talk to me a little bit about what it meant to have Patrice and to have the opportunity to tell the story of the horror and then also the aftermath of the horror.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. And yeah, like as Patrice described, not in our town and in our mission, it really is a calling of just galvanizing community together. And it's not enough to even say, this is our organization and this is what we do and this is how we make films. But in the aftermath of 2012, when white supremacists gunned down 7 people, including my father, I think one of the things that we were really searching for was voice. And how can we speak up on behalf of our own community? And we appreciated so many communities from diverse faiths who came together in the aftermath of that. People made a choice that Sunday to not go home and to show up and be outside of a Gurdwara. And we really felt the responsibility of even speaking up for those communities to say thank you. We will never forget this. In our lowest moment, people showed up, and that was their belief. That was what they knew how to do. And over the years, not in our town, and the films that are made are about restoring community, restoring faith, restoring belief, restoring hope. And you see it within every one of these stories. And it comes from a unique place of saying, in our sort of media culture that we have, a lot of times we give a lot of voice to the people who cause the harm, right? The perpetrators, the people who are the aggressors over the dominant, what we see as dominance in culture, but not in our town. Said, no, what we want to do is we want to restore the community that was impacted, the surrounding communities, and we want to empower that voice of people who came together and galvanized and said, not, this is not going to happen here, and we are not going to stand for it. So, 12 years later, we're still appreciative of what the work that Not in Our Town does and the work that you all do of that state of belief.
Well, I appreciate that. I really think that that's what you're talking about is amazing. And by telling these stories, both, interesting kind of through line of telling stories is a way of creating empathy. Like for people who do not understand what it's like to live as a Sikh American and what it's like to go through such a horrific attack, which is also, there were other Sikh Americans and other people attacked after 9/11 and really identified. And so telling that story is one part of the empathy story. And the other part of the empathy story is saying, oh, look what the community did. Look what the Sikh community did, but also what the community around them did. And it's a way to inspire us and prepare us and to have our minds and our hearts and our spirits opened up to the opportunities of how we should be prepared to respond when terrible things hit. Because we're in a moment where, unfortunately, hate has not gone away. The things that you have described in Billings, Montana, in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, and you've done other important films that I want to get to in Pittsburgh and others, that kind of hate has not gone away. In fact, right now we're seeing an epidemic, in fact, of hate across the country. You all have been part of organizing something called Unite Against Hate. Tell me what that is and what you're trying to accomplish with this. I think, you just completed a week of Unite Against Hate. What is that, and how can people learn more about it? Patrice, can you answer that?
I can, and I will. I do want to talk a little bit more about Waking Oak Creek, though, and the power of that story and what we learned from Pardee, his family, the Sikh community, and the city of Oak Creek, because I think it gets to this moment. As you said, hate crimes are going up. There's a serious problem in our country and our world, and we don't focus, as Pardeep says, on the perpetrator. We focus on the community. So the day after the attack at the Sikh Temple of Wisconsin, we got a call from the city of Oak Creek saying, okay, what do we do? Here's what we're planning. And we heard that they were working very directly with the Sikh community, that they were listening to and hearing what the Sikh community wanted to do. We heard that they were going to create an opportunity for National Night Out for the whole community to come and support. And they were planning a vigil with the leadership of the Sikh temple. And we said, we have to send our cameras here right away. This is the kind of thing that really needs to happen in the aftermath, with people who are most harmed sort of leading the way and showing the community what is needed and what they need to help get them through this moment. So we went there, but it wasn't really until 6 months later that we wanted to go back and see how the community was doing and really spend more time with leaders like Pardeep and other, particularly the young people in the Sikh community who told us about Sikhism, who really spoke about what they wanted the country and the world to know about their faith. And then to see them in action, working with the community to stand up against hate against Sikhs and against everyone in their town. So it was quite inspiring. And I think Pardeep is one of the most remarkable leaders I've ever worked with. He is an exemplar, and there are others, of people who have been harmed so deeply and then find their voice and use their voice to stand up for others. And it's like, as he said, we spend so much time on the crime, the perpetrators, etc. And if we can spend more time speaking and learning more from people like Pardeep, learning more from the people in Oak Creek who you meet in our film. I was so struck by the veterans group that decided to do a memorial in front of the Veterans Hall in Oak Creek, sort of saying, we want to remember the people who are harmed in our community as well. It was really quite inspiring. And those are the kinds of stories that we want to tell. This led us to, our stories about what local communities can do to stand up to hate led us to United Against Hate Week. And this is now this week, we just launched the 6th United Against Hate Week. And it started with white supremacists marching through the Bay Area cities, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland. And in the city of Berkeley, the mayor and his chief of staff, Jack McCormick, were standing on the steps of City Hall saying, what can we do? There's melee in our streets. These white supremacists are marching to the streets, and there's violence in the streets. What can regular citizens do? So they started making these posters, and they handed them out in the city. And then Oakland wanted them. And then 13 other cities asked for posters that said, our town stands united against hate. And it was so inspiring, I think, for all of us who were so distraught about these hate groups marching in our town, to see there's resistance in every store, in so many windows in our town. So we brought these communities together and said, you did the posters, what do you want to do next? And this was their brainchild. These cities came together and said, we want to do a United Against Hate Week. And this is the 6th.
It's fantastic. And I think it points to the idea that if you can give people the tools to come together, to do something tangible, to show up in a way that will make a difference in the lives of those who have been harmed, but also to create a vision for a different kind of future. Pardeep, you are, as Patrice mentioned, an exemplar in this. And I think many of us who have not gone through what you've gone through are kind of somewhat in awe. And we ask ourselves the question, could I do what he did? And I think what you offer us is kind of like, not only can you, but you actually kind of, if I can do it, I'm not like some sort of mythical creature out there. I'm a real person who had his own struggles. I mean, talk to us a little bit about how you understand your own story as something that people can really relate to, and then how you turn that into such an inspiring avenue for us to learn and to be inspired and to be encouraged and maybe even be more brave than we think we could be in difficult moments.
No, thank you for that question, Reverend Paul. Yeah. And I think about, as you mentioned, tools. I also think about we got to combine the tools. We have to combine the tools with willpower. And part of that, I fundamentally believe is near and dear to all of our faiths when we practice from that place of compassion and love, and as you said, empathy. And we have to have that strength going forward. We are facing incredible challenges. The world will continue to face incredible challenges. I know that there's a lot of people who feel raw and torn and feel like sometimes the amount of pain that is happening in the world is unsurmountable. But I just encourage people to say, you know what, this is what you are meant for. This is when you need to lean into your faith. And this is a great, not that we would want suffering to happen to anyone, right? But this is a great opportunity for us to address things so that these challenges are addressed in our lifetime and don't need to be, something that our kids need to take on. And I think that was really the inspiration of why we were doing what we were doing. Was I saw the long faces of kids and generations who felt like white supremacy hated them and then they should hate themselves. And so really took it on and said, you know what, if I don't do this work personally from a place of showing them that we can get further upstream, and that's what United Against Hate Week is about. 2017, we had a rally in Berkeley, and that was in response to white supremacists who were attacking. Fast forward to today, to 2023, we are building an entire infrastructure to be able to monitor, address, and get in front of hate before it happens. We are having the conversations that we probably should have had a very long time ago, and now nobody can hide from those conversations of how geopolitics affects, our everyday life, and that's okay. Yes, it's heavy. Yes, we care. Yes, we feel raw, but we all need to lean into our faiths and know that we have courage there.
I so appreciate that. I wonder if you can talk a little bit, Patrice, about the one of your more recent films, which is called Repairing the World: Stories from the Tree of Life. This is the terrible story of the shooting that happened in the synagogue in Pittsburgh. Talk to us about the experience of making that film, and what were some of the things that, as you were going in as a filmmaker, you were just aware of that you were stepping into?
Well, our stories are not about the horror of hate. They're about what we can do about it. And Pardeep and I had been traveling around the country showing Waking Oak Creek and sparking discussions. And in the discussions of our films, people don't often talk about the town that it's about. So they weren't necessarily talking about Oak Creek. They were talking about their own experiences. What's happening in our town that we need to pay attention to, that this film reminds us we need to pay attention to. And we started hearing these multiple stories of anti-Semitism. Now, we know that anti-Semitism has been around for thousands of years. This is not something new. And of course, it had been there. It was, part of the response in Billings. But this was different. This was a new feature. This is like 2015, 2016. And so, as one of the journalists says in our film, when the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history happened at the Tree of Life Synagogue, in 2018, it was horrifying, but it wasn't surprising. You had seen this rising anti-Semitic conspiracy theories spread over social media, attacks on journalists, Jewish journalists. It was there. Young people in, doing the Sig Heil. It was, horrific, events on gaming and social media. So we immediately sent Shireen Zalis, my filmmaking partner, went immediately to Pittsburgh, not just because of the nature of the crime, but because we started to see this massive response in the city of Pittsburgh. It was like nothing we'd ever seen in a large city like this. And when you see the film, you see it, you feel it. The interfaith, the expression of interfaith support, hundreds of faith leaders on the stage just days after this attack, expressing solidarity to the Jewish community. Sports teams dedicating their games to the people whose lives had been lost. Really massive show of support. And so it was that story that we wanted to tell.
Yeah. Again, it's so great. And I'll mention to our listeners, if you're in the Miami area, we're going to be screening that in Miami, and then we'll have a talk back about it, in part because part of what I, as an interfaith leader and the president of Interfaith Alliance, we see that around the country. I mean, we're in a moment where many of our churches, many of our synagogues and mosques and gurdwaras are feeling under attack, and sometimes are actually being attacked. And the idea of like, how do we respond? And I have been very gratified. Also, like we had a church in Fresno who had a LGBT fundraiser, and then the Proud Boys knocked all the windows of the sanctuary open, and they left their card. And what happened? The interfaith communities all went into the sanctuary. The imam, the rabbi, the local indigenous Latina lady, everybody showed up and said, we're not going to stand for this. And they called on the mayor, and, it was, but this is these examples of empowerment and response. And, it does beg the question, like, how do we get out in front of it? And I think that's what, like, United Against Hate is trying to invite. And, one thing I do want to just ask you, Pardeep, about your book, and just the idea that, the gift of our wounds is I think a conversation between you and a white supremacist, but I want you to let me know a little bit more about it. But like, how do we, because right now I'm in kind of fight mode. I feel like this is like an existential moment for our democracy. It's an existential moment for communities I love, and I find myself balling my fist, and I'm trying to be inspired to open my hand in a gesture of friendship. Pardeep, maybe you can help me along my path.
No, thank you, Reverend. I think balling your fist is a good, healthy emotion. I think that we should be angry. We should be frustrated. We should be concerned. Some of the work that we're embarking on now, as we're getting ahead of hate, there is a political element to this. We do not want to lose the traction that we have made. And that causes us to recommit in the efforts that we've already started. And there's a real concern about not being able to see something through. With that said, I created so the book highlights a journey that I personally took with a former white supremacist. His name is Arnold Michaelis. He started the same gang or organization that the shooter in our situation belonged to. And part of me also wanted to look at, why do people get into hate? And how can we stop a person who maybe has joined a group like the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers, or even like within the spectrum of just understanding hate, some people can go too far and get extreme in their views. And what we wanted to do was, like, Arnold and I wanted to get further upstream and say, okay, can we prevent the next one from doing it? And over the past 12 years, we've been able to do that with multiple individuals who would come to our talks and say, hey, I was thinking about joining this group. Well, you know what? There's a better way to live your life. And that part of that we don't get to talk to about as much, but it really took us stepping back and saying, okay, like we need to reach everybody. If we're going to really prevent hate from happening, we have to reach law enforcement, we have to reach faith communities, civic organizations, but we also have to reach the perpetrators of violence. And maybe our society has become so rejectionist that even these people who we believe are evil or bad or whatever, we're throwing them away, but not understanding that they're having the consequences of devastating families and because they're hurting, right? And what we say is that hurt people hurt other people. And in my own personal journey, Arno Michele, sometimes we look for people who would be the ones that went, okay, I'll go to this person for support because I know they're supportive. But sometimes to heal ourselves, really, we need to go to a person that may challenge us. And that was who Arno was. He challenged a lot of stereotypes of even what I had around people who get involved in, what people call the movement. But, today I just see him as a brother. He babysits our kids. He watches the kids. We know his family well. He knows our family well. We live about 15 miles from one another, so we hang out quite a bit. And I think the best testament to this is I called him one day and I said, this was about 5 years after the shooting, and I just said, "Thank you." He's like, "Thank you for what?" Well, thank you for raising your hand. Thank you for, because a lot of times people will not raise their hand. They will say, you know what, I don't want to do that work because it's messy, it's ugly. I have a lot of guilt around my past. And I said, thank you for being a brother, and thank you for also being a therapist. I'm in the mental health world, and I could say that he has done more for my sort of personal mental health journey than maybe anybody could have. But with that said as well, I have never, ever, ever forgotten all of the people from different communities, especially faith-based communities, who have shown up and continue to show up. And I think that there's something that strikes us at our core when a synagogue gets attacked, when a gurdwara gets attacked, when a church gets attacked, when a masjid gets attacked. Because what we know that those places aren't just places. Those places are where people get married, people cry, people lose their life, people grieve together, right? These are communities that people gather together and want to drop all of the sort of like the armor that they have about the world and just find themselves closer to God. And for six, and I think this is for Muslims and Christians and Jews and all of us, we're anchored to one God. We're all anchored to one God. We have different beliefs, which makes this unique. And why we're so rich is because of the diversity of faiths and experiences and faces and lifestyles. It is said, and I think this is said in the Quran and deliberately said in the Quran and said in many Sikh scriptures, that our God he is strong enough to make us all look the same, all walk the same, talk the same, dress the same, eat the same, believe the same. We could have had sameness, right? But our God believed in our capacity and our will to say, listen, I'm going to make you diverse because your mission on this earth is to not just love the person that's like you, walks like you, talks like you, agrees with you, right? Love the person who doesn't. That's your journey here. And that's all of our journey. And we not going to sugarcoat it. You know this, Patrice knows this. We have challenges ahead of us, and these are nothing less than spiritual challenges. But I do believe that if we are close to our faith and close to our sacredness, that we will win these challenges.
Preach. I love it. Thank you.
Sorry,
That's good. Patrice, maybe you can tell me just a little bit, just getting into the art of filmmaking and the art of like what it means to tell stories using the medium of film. How does that? Is there a philosophy that you use, or how do you get into that? And what does filmmaking mean to you as a mode of expression?
Yeah, I think we rarely have opportunities to sort of hear and see the impact of the horrors of violence and hate in our lives. It's a flashpoint. It's maybe a headline on the news. And I think for us, I never thought that I would be a filmmaker that devoted most of my life to telling stories about community response to hate crimes. It's just, I didn't anticipate that. It happened because we told a story that spread. We told a story that allowed people to access their own lives and their own voices through Not in Our Town. And they started identifying as Not in Our Town communities. And I think there's a certain way that we make the films that resonate with people. And that is, we, in our films, I think anyone can enter them and see themselves, can see, who am I in this story? Who am I, and what do I do to stand up in the face of hate? And I've always, I always love asking that question after one of our films, like, who did you identify? And I remember being at a Sikh temple in Silicon Valley, showing the film Waking Oak Creek to a group of people, mostly Sikh audience, and I asked, okay, who did you identify with in the film? And like 3 people raised their hands and they said, Lieutenant Brian Murphy. Brian Murphy is the police officer who went in trying to defend the temple. He was running towards the temple when the perpetrator came out and shot him 15 times. And he lived, and he became, I think, a great friend to the Sikh community, and has spoken and developed a strong relationship with the Sikh community, both in Wisconsin and around the country. And I love that about the story, is that we see each other in this story. We see each other in a different way. And that is by design. That is what we hope to do with our films, is show what role each of us can play in this, and in making change in our own communities. As an example of this, someone that I emulate and really look up to, as Pardeep was talking about forgiveness and reaching out to people who you don't necessarily agree with. Dan Legger, who was one of the people who was injured and survived at the synagogue, he was a member of one of the congregations, is speaking 6 months later to his community, and he's very frail at this time. He was injured horribly, and he said that the key is to find and reach out, not to just people that we agree with, but those who are perpetrators, and to understand and to listen to what caused this and what might have made this happen. And I think that's really hard. That is really hard. And but it's an important lesson, this listening, right? This sort of listening to try to understand. I mean, on a personal level, I reject the man who murdered the people at the Sikh temple, at the synagogue in Pittsburgh. I don't reject his humanity, but there is no excuse, I think, in my mind, for what he did, and he needed to pay, as he did, through the legal system, through the justice system, for what he did. But trying to understand how this could have happened. How could this have happened? I think that's the strength of the story of Pittsburgh, and the story of their relentless drive in the community to say, how could this have happened? And what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah, we're all asking those questions right now of our country, because this is happening again. There's terrible things happening, and we need to be very, vigilant. And I do think that Not in Our Town is such a great resource for us, and Unite Against Hate. How can people find out about Not in Our Town? Is there a website that people can go to?
Yes, NIOT.org, notinourtown.org. And You can find our films there. They're for free. You can use them in your classroom. You can use them in their community. You can show them after a service or,
Yeah.
In your town hall. So
Yeah. This is a
there are,
real resource. Yeah.
and there are action kits. What can you do in your community to start a group that will raise awareness about the problem of hate, start bringing people together to say who is being harmed in our community and what can we do together to make it a safer, more inclusive place for everyone. So you can find all of that in the About section on NIAT.org. You can learn more about the film Repairing the World at repairingtheworldfilm.org. And you can learn more about United Against Hate Week at unitedagainsthateweek.org and what you can do.
Thank you so much. Not in Our Town is a movement to stop hate, racism, and bullying and build safe, inclusive communities for all. Patrice Pardeep, thank you for all that you do, and thank you so much for joining me this week on The State of Belief.
Thank you, Reverend Paul.
Up next, social impact media strategist Mario Carafresh. If you miss any part of today's program, you can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. And make sure you subscribe to the Next Generation podcast at stateofbelief.com/new podcast. That's stateofbelief.com/new podcast. You're listening to State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
I'm Roxy Stone.
And I'm Caitlin Beatty.
Saved by the City is a podcast from two Christian women cracking the code of faith from the mean streets of New York City.
Our podcast captures what happens when purity culture meets hookup culture, when distraction steals from devotion, and when the diversity of viewpoints and lifestyles clash against assumptions.
Gotham can be a weird place for Christian women, but we're out there and we have stories to tell.
Saved by the City, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
My next guest is Mario Carafresh, a pioneering social impact media strategist, storyteller, and creator. Mario worked for nearly 15 years at Viacom International as Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Social Responsibility, and is now a student at Harvard Divinity School and a Media and Entertainment Fellow in the Harvard Religion and Public Life, where he developed an organization dedicated to bringing religious literacy to Hollywood called deeperdive.org. I'm really excited to explore the potential of film and other media for creating change and community. Mario, welcome to the State of Belief.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mario, you are so welcome. You and I are fairly new friends, but I feel like we're old friends. You are doing such cool work, and I know you're actually kind of towards the end of your first semester at Harvard Divinity. So thank you for spending some time with us. But you've had a whole career, and you've done so much cool work in media, and I love that you're bringing it to religious literacy and how we can understand religion more. But before we get there, talk a little bit about your background. Where are you from, and how did you get to this incredible career and now at Harvard?
Sure. I was born and raised in El Salvador. I went to school in Georgetown University. And after graduation, I was oscillating between DC and Miami when I met in a very serendipitous way at a dinner the then president of MTV, Antoinette Zell. And we struck into a very deep conversation about how media is a catalyst for social impact. And it's something that she wanted to do at the time. This is right around the year 2000. She felt that MTV was not just a brand, but it was a culture maker. And as such, she felt the responsibility of also not only entertaining through music and entertaining TV shows that were at the time in their infancy stage. She thought that we could interweave social impact messaging. And I couldn't believe that actually somebody like MTV was interested in social impact. And she offered me the job. She offered me the job first as a 6-month temp to help her write the roadmap on how you could achieve this. And once we finished writing it, she said, "Would you like to stay?" And I said, "I'll stay for 6 months and see how it goes." And that became almost 20 years. I worked for 15 years as an employee. And then I've been working, producing MTV documentaries as a non-employee, as a consultant since 2017. And right now I am in the midst of producing a mini series of short documentaries for MTV.
It's just great. And some of these documentaries were, I just should mention, like they dealt with issues that were really important for people who were kind of adhered to the MTV brand. Things like AIDS at the time, right? HIV, AIDS,
so
things go ahead.
Correct. Yeah, we did HIV, AIDS. We did topics that at the moment were very new to the general market and to youth as well. Human trafficking was right after HIV AIDS. It was a topic that nobody was even touching. And MTV was the first one, like HIV AIDS. Then we had the environment, we have recycling. Teen pregnancy the percentages were so high in the US that MTV decided to co-produce an entire TV show that became a brand, a franchise for many, many seasons called Teen Mom and 16 and Pregnant. And the research shows, independent research shows that in the areas where the TV show was consumed the most, teen pregnancy percentages dropped. So it was evident that the idea that this woman, Antoinette Zell, had back in 2000 was not only a culture maker, but it was an impact maker.
Right. And what's interesting is that you also had a religious background. I mean, you kind of went through your own spiritual journey, right? I mean, you were raised in the Catholic Church, and then you kind of went through your own spiritual journey, but it's been a really important part of your life, obviously.
Yes, I think that as many Americans in the U.S., in Europe and Latin America as well, we're seeking diverse forms of reaching greatness, God, enlightenment through some type of a spirituality. And I've always been a very curious person. I never quite left my religion. I just went into others as an interloper to see how things worked somewhere else, while always safely keeping one foot where I belong. I married a Jew. Then I was very interested in Kabbalah. Later, I became very interested in the practice of yoga, which I know it's a whole different conversation, but that led me into meditation, into Hinduism meditation, into Buddhism meditation. So eventually, I created what I call my own a la carte religion, while continuing with the base of what I was raised. I have borrowed as I feel I need to supplement or to make me into a more wholesome person.
Yeah, and I think that actually a lot of us have gone through that, have been on a search and then found things that are of value and things that, we're not so interested in, and we create something. But it's part of that, I think, is really beginning to understand, I see, I can appreciate what this is for what it is. And, I'm wondering if that search didn't also help you kind of get to the place where you are now, where
absolutely,
you see all of your background of incredible storytelling and, documentary and impact, entertainment. And then, beginning to imagine, how can that help me understand religious diversity and the fact that they can be different, but they don't have to be worse or better. I think that's what I so talk to me a little bit about how you began to fuse those two wonderful passions.
So that curiosity of learning about other religions, which I was part of, I'm sure, millions of people, led me to travel around the world and actually experience these religions in their own place, and I was able to understand what religions around the world looked like in the last 15, 20 years. That has been my travels to learn about religions. And that gave me the curiosity to watch the TV that we were making, the content that we were making, the content that everybody's making in Hollywood, that they're still representing those religions that I have just seen firsthand, so different from what I was looking at on television or in the films. And that curiosity led me to, why are we still using these old stereotypes? How come we, the media makers, the culture makers, have not come up to speed to be able to represent what the different religions look like today? And that brought me to what is known as the Religious Literacy Project at the Harvard Divinity School. I came here to take one course 8 years ago. And that curiosity became very deep curiosity. And so I did take the program that is offered in collaboration between the Divinity School and the Extension School for Professionals. And it's a higher education certificate to learn about religion. And that's where I became informed about religious literacy. And with that information, I created the deeper dive. So just to clarify, it's not a project that I created for HDS. It's a project that was created by me while studying at HDS, informed by HDS. And yes, I do hope that one day it becomes a program, an official program of the school. But right now I am studying to learn more, deeper, wider about the subject matter, and to understand why is it that we are still lacking the correctness in religious diversity on screen. And it's an ongoing study. It's a new study that I feel I am the pioneer of, that I'm sure other people may have questioned it, but maybe because I am not an academic and I am a professional in the industry, and I'm kind of the first one from the industry coming to academia to try to understand why are we, the professionals, not doing a better job. And so I created this deeper dive project, which is it's inspired by GLAAD, the Gay Lesbian Association for Anti-Defamation, who has a very robust training program for media executives that teaches them how to portray LGBTQAI+ correctly and currently as these communities are living today, not as they were 10 years ago or 30 years ago or 50 years ago, like we're doing with religion. So the training that I've developed is in a similar fashion. I was consulted by GLAAD. They were incredibly kind and giving, sharing their knowledge in how to use their model and take away LGBTQAI+ and put religious literacy, religious pluralism in it. And that's what the program is now.
Yeah, this is so good. And I think that the other thing that, you come at it from, we want to make sure that religion is well represented and appropriately represented and avoid stereotypes, but also it'll result in richer stories. And
Absolutely.
and better stories, because religions are the original storytellers. They tell stories about what matters, about what happened. This is the heart of storytelling, is the religious effort to pass that down. And I think often,
Absolutely.
Right now we're in a moment, of crisis. We see terrible anti-Semitism happen. We see rising anti-Muslim hate. We see all sorts of hate rising, and people are just falling into this, oh, well, I know what they're all about. And often where we find our stereotypes, unfortunately, is in the media. And
Correct.
and the opportunity that I think you're offering through training, but then also just awareness. It's just like it should be part of what you're thinking about. It doesn't have to be the only thing you're thinking about, but it should be part of what you're thinking about as you're developing projects, as you're developing stories, is how does religion fit into it, and how does religion fit into it well, in a way that the people who practice that religion will actually feel properly represented rather than, two-dimensional.
Correct. Yes, there are a couple of studies that started last year and are culminating this year about it. Viacom is the first company who is actually doing it. That's where I worked. And it's called Reflecting Me, and they do that ongoing. It's probably every year or every 2 years. And they take a pulse on the Viacom audience and how they feel reflected. Usually has been limited to race, gender, and sexuality. And this year, they added religion to it. And I cannot wait to see what the results are going to be, because I feel like they're going to prove my thesis that we're not reflecting them. We're not reflecting the different communities correctly. There is another organization that just finished a similar study, and it's called Harris X. They are going to publish that in January or February. I got a little taste of it, a little preview, and it was like, oh my goodness, this is a big teaser for me, because this is the data. This is the data that I need to go back to Hollywood, because we in Hollywood, we talk about ratings. We talk about the bottom line, because if we have good ratings, means or good sales of the film, it means we're going to have good sponsors. And it's all, at the end of the day, it's good to have a content that makes money, because you can make more content and you can create jobs and et cetera, et cetera. We know that hitting the bottom line is important. And like you said, the better we reflect the audiences, the more engaging the content is going to be with the audience, and they're going to get better ratings. They're going to get more sales.
Yeah. So all you Hollywood executives out there, you're going to be hiring Mario and Deeper Dive very soon if you want good sales. You heard it first here on The State of Belief. One thing that we need right now is empathy, and we need to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and to imagine ourselves as wherever other people are. And I think of film and video as some of the strongest ways, as well as books, that we can step into another life and say, oh, okay, I had not seen that before, but now I'm seeing it. And we are also talking to the folks in Not in Our Town who have done films about the shooting in Pittsburgh and the shooting at Oak Creek, and they are really trying to help people come along with empathy to other communities and stand with them as much as possible. And how do you see empathy playing in your efforts of religious literacy and understanding?
There's an old saying somewhere that I picked it up, that we are what we consume. And it's not just about food, but it's also about what we consume in books and on screens, correct? The more nuance and the better representations we have on screen, the more educated the general audience will be about anything. So if you look today, what the diversity, equity, and inclusion in Hollywood has done for the LGBTQAI community, for women, for Blacks, and to a certain extent for Hispanics and Asians, we, the general market, we go out on the streets and we are more likely to have more empathy, less, and be more tolerant about meeting someone that is not from our immediate circle, whether it's a woman, whether it's a Black, whether it's a gay, or whatever it may be. That is what we are not. I think today, if you ask a 30-year-old person to describe a gay person, the 30-year-old or younger may not even understand the question. because what they are consuming on the screen is there's so much nuance and variety and diversity on sexuality that to them it's not the same issue for someone who is like our age, over 50, that we were raised with certain images and certain parameters of what people look like. So the more varied and accurate, it's not just diversity and equity and inclusion, it's accuracy to what it looks like today out there on the street. So even if you are trying to do diversity, equity, and inclusion of, let's say, women and Blacks on TV, but you're not being nuance about, there's no nuance about it, or being diverse enough, we're consuming this. We're going to go out on the street and find women that look different and Blacks that look different, and we're going to still be, let's say, feeling that they are other. While I think Hollywood is doing a great job to show the variety of today's women in the U.S. or today's Blacks in the U.S. I think they're doing a great job.
And I think we have to do better around religion is the punchline. Yeah, this is so great. What is your, I like to ask, first of all, let me just say, everybody should go now to deeperdive.org, check it out, and learn. And even if you're not a media mogul, you can look at deeperdive.org, and I guarantee you, because I've spent some time on the site, you're going to learn things, and it's going to be really an enjoyable read. I like to end the program asking everyone, what gives you hope? What do you see that gives you hope right now?
What gives me hope, specifically to the work that I'm doing, is that I have tested this thesis in Hollywood, in Miami, and in New York with top media executives. When I tell you top media executives, and also with the executives who are in the director and VP level that are managing the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I want to almost say that 100%, but I'm sure it's 99 because there's 1% room for error. 99% of them are so supportive of the work that I'm doing because they feel that it's very needed. And at the same time, they see that nobody else is doing it. So it gives me hope that Hollywood is very receptive and very willing to accept change and to accept more requirements for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as you can only imagine, that to a lot of people, that may be like, oh, here comes yet just one more movement that we got to deal with. But this is really the one movement we should have been dealing with from the beginning of the beginnings, because religion is not the only, but religion is the movement that touches all the movements.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mario Cardafresh is a social impact media strategist, storyteller, and creator. For over 20 years, his groundbreaking original content has premiered globally on MTV, Nickelodeon, VH1, Comedy Central, Paramount, and elsewhere. He's a philanthropist, an author, and an inspiration. Mario, thank you so much for being with us today on The State of Belief.
Thank you very much.
And that's all the time we have for The State of Belief this week. Be sure to subscribe to the new and improved podcast called The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform, or at stateofbelief.com/new podcast. Subscribe to The State of Belief today. We need your help keeping The State of Belief going. I hope you'll consider being a partner in this crucial work by making a financial contribution today. Information on how to donate is available at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. And if you're getting something out of this show, share it with your friends and family. Let's get more people listening and keep these conversations going when the show is over. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at State of Belief and share State of Belief with the people in your networks. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. We will be talking with the Reverend Jim Martin about gratitude and Thanksgiving. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandes Reichenbusch on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.